If the police want to follow the trail of the medical marijuana from the cardholder to the caregiver to the grower, that information is not attainable. This makes it very difficult to keep an eye on any abuses. Law enforcement needs to monitor the activity to ensure the law is being followed. It gets a little confusing, but let's walk through an exercise illustrating the challenge with compliance verification. An officer has an individual with 72 ounces of usable marijuana in their possession. They claim they are a caregiver for 3 patients, and the OMMP staff verifies that is correct with no way to identify the grower and the patient. So the assumption is that there is no medical marijuana inventory in the possession of either the patient or the grower. The grower is allowed to possess the same 72 ounces as well as the patient. So for a caregiver of 3, there is now a potential 216 ounces of usable marijuana in the pipeline with no control over whether the consumption of the product is only for the patient who can legally use it. That's 13.5 pounds of marijuana. This creates temptation and opportunity for significant abuse because the situation I just laid out is for that one day. The potential is that the same amount could be added to the pipeline the next day without any way for law enforcement to verify the amount that is appropriate under the law. There is also too much temptation because the profits are so large. The amount of marijuana allowed by a grower for 3 is equal to $15,000 in street value marijuana in our area. In places where it's completely illegal, it's worth as much as $90,000. There is no doubt that there are abuses, and our law is attracting the criminal element. Here are examples. A federal fugitive was arrested on a warrant for PCS/MCS methamphetamine in Texas. That fugitive obtained OMMA cards as a federal fugitive. He is now in legal possession of 92 marijuana plants in Oregon. An OMMA caregiver with 1 card has 69 marijuana plants and 53 seedlings. This caregiver obtained the card illegally by providing a copy of his false Oregon identification card. The caregiver is a convicted felon from Texas with 5 warrants under his true name. Utah State Police seized 13 pounds of marijuana purchased from an OMMA cardholder for $47,000. An OMMP caregiver for 2 had 15 pounds of marijuana seized. They admitted to selling 80 to 90 pounds a year for $3,200 to $4,200 a pound. This person recruited 18 and 19-year-olds to get caregiver cards to sell. An OMMP caregiver was arrested for arranging to sell 50 pounds of marijuana for $125,000. Officers seized 107 pounds of marijuana, U.S. currency, 2 handguns, and a rifle. This caregiver has prior felony convictions and founded a medical marijuana organization that is believed to have helped other medical marijuana patients obtain their medicine. And the list goes on. Here's a new twist. It appears that under the current definitions, an OMMP cardholder can possess up to 24 ounces of hashish or hashish oil. 24 ounces of hashish is equivalent to 120 ounces or 7.5 pounds of marijuana. 24 ounces of hashish oil is equivalent to 1,200 ounces or 75 pounds of marijuana. We also need to look at the relationship between the patient's inventory and the grower's inventory. Currently, the patient is allowed to have in their possession 24 ounces of marijuana. The grower is allowed 6 plants and 18 seedlings to create the inventory to meet the medical needs of the patient. What is happening is that the growers have figured out growing methods to create much larger plants that produce excess inventory. Once again, the system is creating the temptation for abuse. And finally, there is no consideration to neighbors and land use laws for grow sites. Marijuana grow sites are popping up next to parks, schools, and in residential neighborhoods. And under the current Oregon law, a person at any level of the OMMP is exempt from prosecution for endangering the welfare of a minor or from child neglect in the first degree. Why is it that a person involved in the OMMP is exempt from the laws that other citizens are not? Essentially, the proponents of the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program are now in charge of the program and the law. They ensure little program oversight, they limit record disclosure that help control abuses, they create the temptation and the reality of abuse, and create more marijuana inventory than is required for the compassionate care requested by the voters of Oregon.
Welcome back to Jackson County Close Up as we continue our discussion here about the issues surrounding Oregon's medical marijuana laws and how they're affecting Jackson County, and especially Jackson County law enforcement, and really affecting a lot of people, as we're finding out during this program. You know, I'm not one who, how do you say this? I'm not one who supports a lot of government regulation and government rules and things like that. But what I'm seeing here, this whole issue, there's none at all. In that it's a free-for-all out there with lots of people making lots of money somewhere and a lot of abuse going on other places. But there's no precedent anywhere here.
Well, I think we're going into really uncharted territory. I mean, you know, Oregon was one of the earliest states that legalized it for medicinal use, and our possession limits have increased over the years, and we're still one of the front runners in the just sheer number or amount that you can possess, and a lot of it's uncharted territory. I mean, I don't think a lot of people recognize the aftermath and results of what may have been a well-intentioned law. So,
and the other thing that the general public doesn't understand is, and the sheriff mentioned it at the break, we can go out, we'll get a complaint, we'll go out and we'll make contact with the person that has the card, is a grower, is a care provider. They'll have their 6 adult plants, they'll have their 18 seedlings, they may have their 1.5 pounds of weed there, or whatever they're providing to their other card holders or patients. They may be in compliance, and so then you have to tell the complainant who lives next door or lives down the street or
that they're in compliance.
That they're in compliance, and so then some of that anger gets pushed back on us because, well, we're not doing anything about it, when in reality it's out of our hands at that point if they are in compliance. What we're seeing is there's a lot of out of compliance, and that's just the ones you're seeing. It's as they say, as rats on a ship. For every one you see, there's 12 more you can't. Yeah. There's a lot that like we're probably only hitting a small portion of that because it's so widespread. But I would agree that there are people that are compliant. I would agree that there are people that are doing it for the right reason. But I would venture to say, and it's the big wink everywhere that you go and you talk to these.
Everybody kind of looks away.
Everybody looks away and they don't want to admit it. But I would say that the majority of the people involved in this program are taking advantage of it in one way or another. And I think that's been proven on the law enforcement side, and it's proven by their own statistics, because their own statistics are off the chart. The number of cards that are being processed and renewed every day, the number of people that are applying for cards, the limited number that are getting rejected, and the sheer numbers alone just in Jackson-Josephine County. If you combine Jackson-Josephine County numbers, somewhere in the area of 8,000 cards out there.
Almost 3,000 cards in Josephine County. And you know, the other thing is you look at is you can possess 1.5 pounds of processed marijuana. If you have 6 mature plants, a lot of the photos that we're seeing and a lot of the plants that we come into contact with are not small plants. I mean, quite honestly, I will give it to our neighbors down here in Southern Oregon. There's a lot of them that have a green thumb and they know how to grow plants. And it's not unusual for us to go out and have contact with someone that has a plant that's 10 feet tall, 11 feet tall. Now, if you have 6 mature plants that are that size, when you cut them down and you harvest the bud, you're going to be out of compliance almost right off the bat, you know, because you can only have 1.5 pounds, if that makes any sense.
So what do you do? So that's what the excess is, what is apparently being sold.
The amount that you can grow creates a huge excess.
And you're not the 1.5 pounds is only the usable marijuana. And again, that's another problem with this law is it's the 1.5 pounds that's usable is what your possession amount is. You could have another 15 pounds of bud hanging on your 6 to 8 foot trees.
That's not mature yet.
It's mature. You just haven't harvested it.
Just haven't harvested it yet.
So it's still sitting there. So it's a continuous. You could have 1.5 pounds today. You could have 1.5 pounds tomorrow. We have more stringent laws regarding fish and game rules. I'm a fisherman. I know exactly how many I can have today and how many I can have in a 7-day period. Okay, I get 2 salmon a day. I can only have twice the daily bag limit. Certain amounts. It's not that way with marijuana. You can have this amount. The rest of it can be hanging on the tree, and you can have the same amount tomorrow. So there's no aggregate possession limit.
It seems like nobody has recognizing the extent of where we're at today. I'm talking about lawmakers, you know, state reps and the people, the commissioners, the city councils. Are they beginning to recognize this? I mean, you're out there leading the way here, Sheriff. So, Mike, is that your intent here too?
I think people are starting to recognize it. And the law, when it was first formed, it like everyone said, even the Mail Tribune recently, there was an opinion piece that said that, I was against this whole. I'm not against people that are using it for a legitimate reason and are in compliance, but it wasn't detailed enough. And so what we're dealing with now is we had a generic or a general rule, but I mean, you don't have to go to Jedediah State Park to see the redwoods. All you got to do is go to some of these groves. These trees are, these marijuana plants are huge.
Well, you had a huge, we're talking differences of growing on federal lands, which you've had, I know, huge busts, and you work, I know, with other counties and do that, versus what you guys are saying is the controlled anywhere. I mean, anybody can do this anywhere, next to a school, you can grow all of these things. Is there no regulation at all whatsoever in this whole area? Is the legislature anybody doing something about this, or are we just going to continue year after year, come back and say it's bigger, it's more of it, there's thousands of more things, and we still have a lot of people that have issues here?
Well, as a dope cop, my hope is that someone gets the attention of those that can look at this and make changes where necessary. Because right now there are no regulations. I can take you out.
Not at all.
I can take you out. Well, I would say there are no regulations that have enough meat and oomph behind it to do something. Because the reality is I can take you out right now and I can take you to a location adjacent to a school where there's marijuana growing adjacent to a playground. I can take you to a location where there's marijuana growing within probably 25 yards of a police station. I can take you to another location where it's growing adjacent to a courthouse. I can take you to another location where it's growing adjacent to a city park. I don't think that's what people...
That was not the intent.
I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that was the intent or people envisioned that happening. I don't think they envisioned Vicodin pill factories in everyone's backyard, and it could be adjacent to daycare centers, schools, playgrounds, nursery care.
And if someone is in compliance, your hands are tied.
That's true.
Absolutely.
I mean, you literally, you
have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
They're legal, law-abiding citizens. There's not a thing you can do about that. So, are there things that we see that we don't agree with or don't think is right? Absolutely. But there are a lot of things, not only with the regulations in reference to where it can be grown or lack of regulations on where it can be grown. Children can get medical marijuana cards. I mean, we deal on a regular basis with the schools. And school districts here locally are having a lot of issues with students that have medical marijuana cards. Kids coming to school.
That's going to be an issue you're going to have to deal with, because you're going to get the calls from the schools.
Well, we do.
You get them now. You get them now.
And the schools have to deal with that.
And what do the schools do with that?
And if you look at the regulation, minor, if it's signed off by their parent or guardian, can have a medical marijuana card. So it's all these problems that I don't think were envisioned back in 1998 and 1999. I mean, the box has been opened and it's landed in our lap. And
we're kind of the epicenter, aren't we, here? Well, because we grow it, because we can grow it, and a lot of people are there. Well, I know in the weekly real estate meetings that I go to as an agent, I heard this the first time, I think maybe a couple months ago, well, maybe it was during the fall, I guess, when agents were all of a sudden bringing up issues about, they were showing properties and there were marijuana facilities next door to properties that were being for sale. All of a sudden buyers were just like freaking out at this type of thing and some of that. So that was all of a sudden, that's kind of come center stage.
A lot of time there's unsavory activity that is associated with that. Absolutely, it's not blanket all or never, but oftentimes there's unsavory activity and traffic that's associated with it.
It's the abusers, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, it is the abusers. It's like anything, it's the abusers that ruin it for people who legitimately need it a lot of times. Need any type of program, but where does, there's also a rights line of if you're a law-abiding citizen that doesn't do drugs and you have a nice home and you've invested savings and payments and taxes and you do all that, and then you have this abusive operation going that's devaluing. There's just your land, your house. Where's that fair? Where does their rights supersede yours? So
you have people that can't enjoy their their backyard patios in the summertime because of the odor and all the other things that are going on. We've had